And now, the best 60-ish seconds of your week. And the cold days of fall are beginning to be upon us, and Election Day 2023 is now behind us. And bluntly, the results were not good for Republicans across the country. And here in my home state of Pennsylvania, they were particularly troubling because the race for the Supreme Court was lost by Republican Carolyn Carluccio by roughly 200,000 votes. A race that was really pivotal to control of the Supreme Court because of an anomaly several years ago where 3 Democrats picked up seats on the Supreme Court in order to control that seemingly unpolitical body, but increasingly political bench. The only way that Republicans were going to take back control of the Supreme Court under usual circumstances was by winning that seat on Tuesday night. They did not. And so the future portends some trouble from the High Court in Pennsylvania, which has already been a very activist court on issues like reapportionment and on other issues that are going to be coming to the fore in the very near future. And despite the fact that Republican leaders across the state said we were going to make a concerted effort with mail-in ballots, the numbers still reflect that Democrats outperformed Republicans between 3 and 3.5 to 1 on mail-in voting versus Election Day voting. Republicans have got to do 2 things over the course of the next year if they want to win in 2024. One, there has to be a unified message that is appealing to voters across the board and that can win for Republicans. Messaging is going to be very important. The other thing is going to be the ground game, not just the final 72 hours, which has been the pivotal event for Republicans in years past. GOTV, get out the vote or get on the van or however you want to call it. But now it's got to be a much wider window because of early voting. And Republicans have really got to dedicate themselves to doing the hard work of organizational politics, the blocking and tackling, if you will, of Election Day and pre-Election Day work in order to win elections. The Democrats have been doing a pretty good job of it. We've got to rip a page right out of their book and do even better at it. And a lot of these local parties simply don't have the muscle they once had or still think they have. And so those are the realities that confront the Republican Party today, not only in my home state of Pennsylvania, but across the nation in places like Virginia, where the Republicans lost the legislature, and in other states like Kentucky, where they lost the governorship, and in Ohio, where conservatives and Republicans lost a really important ballot question. There's a lot of work to be done, but there's still time, a lot of it, before we get to November 2024. And the day after, there's always got to be a morning after, Republicans held their next in line debate among the presidential candidates that qualified. And as we're moving forward, the requirements become more and more stringent, and so the number of candidates on that debate stage shrinks, and it will shrink again, most likely, before the next debate. And a lot of people are calling this, the race to be number 2 on the ticket. I don't think it's going to be that. I think it's highly likely that Donald Trump, if he is the nominee, will choose someone that isn't in that debate mix right now. But should he want to do that, at this juncture, it looks like it's boiling down to 2 people, one of whom can't run with President Trump for vice president. Check the Constitution on that, unless Donald Trump decides to move, which I think is unlikely at this point. And the person who was taking the most incoming on Wednesday night was former Governor and Ambassador Nikki Haley. Most notably, a couple of cheap shots from Vivek Ramaswamy, who she put down in pretty interesting fashion. Now, whether or not voters will like the fact that she called him scum remains to be seen. But clearly, her polling numbers are doing better, his doing much worse. The more people see of him, I think the less they like him. And it looks now like a 2-horse race among those that are on the debate stage. Tim Scott didn't do as poorly as he's done in some of the previous debates, but still hasn't had that breakthrough or breakout moment. Chris Christie did more poorly than he has done in previous debates, and DeSantis and Haley really seem to be the focus of the attention and the discussion, and I think they will be in the next one as well. And this week, the United States House of Representatives voted to censure Representative Rashida Tlaib for her openly anti-Semitic comments. I mean, we all believe in free speech, but there's a line that is crossed, and she's done it consistently. It's a pattern with her. This from the river to the sea stuff has to be understood to mean I support the total extermination of the state of Israel, and that's been her position. And thankfully, the members of Congress have responded by censuring her. Over 20 Democrats joining with the majority of Republicans, a few Republicans not there, but even they said her conduct was unbecoming and shouldn't ever have taken place. They just didn't think that censure was the appropriate sanction. But that is now done. It's important that we all speak out against the far left's anti-Semitism, and we can't define it any other way. When you talk about the Israeli people, you're talking about Jews. It's as simple as that. And two other quick things, because I've mentioned them before, but I think they're worth mentioning because when we're all in conversation over the course of the next couple of weeks, it's important to say Israel isn't an occupier. They've been there for over 3,500 years. So the occupier stuff or colonizing stuff is total BS. So is apartheid. The Arabs in Israel have more positions of influence and significance, more civil rights, etc., than they do in many of the Arab nations. And finally, this nonsense about it being an apartheid situation over on the Gaza Strip. You know, the number one health issue in Gaza is obesity, not exactly the kind of stuff that you ordinarily see in quote-unquote concentration camps. So when they tell you that it's a concentration camp, don't buy it. When they tell you that Israel practices apartheid, that's just cheap language. And when they say that Israel is a colonizer, it completely defies history. And unfortunately, that's what many, many kids are getting on college campuses from left-wing professors that either don't know the truth or don't want to tell it. And so we see increasingly these demonstrations on college campuses and around them, which are very, very troubling. And hopefully, the rest of us will fight back, will stand up, and will let our voices be heard. And today marks the 11th day of the 11th month. And of course, going back many years, the 11th hour, when World War I ended and we began to observe Armistice Day, which through the years became Veterans Day, as the result of a World War II veteran by the name of Russell Weeks, who pushed so hard to call it Veterans Day. He finally won that battle in the mid-1950s when President Eisenhower signed legislation making it a national holiday called Veterans Day. He was later recognized with the Medal of Freedom by President Ronald Reagan for his work in what Reagan said was becoming the father of Veterans Day. And it's an opportunity for each of us to thank a veteran for what they have done to preserve, protect, and defend our freedoms, our way of life, and our great nation. This isn't Memorial Day. This is not the day that we honor our fallen dead. This is Veterans Day, a day when we recognize and thank all those who served through the years in our armed services. And so today, please take a moment at 2:11 and say thank you with a moment of silence for all who have served our country, and even though it's not Memorial Day, for those who gave that last full measure of devotion. Thank a veteran, because for now, that is the best 60-ish seconds of your week.